Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our May webinar for the ODOT Safe Routes to School program. This month we are focusing on stories from communities who have received education innovation grants. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So whether or not you have received a tier 1 or tier 2 or even tier 3 education grant through ODOT, hopefully this will still be interesting and inspiring. You'll get to hear about a couple of innovative projects over the past couple of years, and also just learn more about the innovation grant and how it fits in with the rest of the ODOT grants, because it's a fairly new program. So we figured we'd use this opportunity to sort of get the word out, as the new grant cycle is going to be a year from now, I think. Yeah, a year from now, 2026. So the structure of this webinar, we'll have Heidi kick us off with talking about what is the innovation grant, kind of how that came to be, how it fits in with other grant processes, the other grant opportunities. And then we're going to hear from Brian and Bend to talk about the grant that they received and how that came to fruition. And then we'll hear from Megan in Portland, talking about the grant that PBOT received. We'll have some discussion and questions. So if you have questions throughout, feel free to put them in the chat. I have a few questions as well, and then we can just discuss at the end. And then, as usual, we have some program announcements. So starting us off, we're going to have Heidi just kind of orient us to the innovation grant more generally. So Heidi, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Nora. Welcome, everyone. I know have a busy busy month with May month. So appreciate all of you being here, especially Brian from Community Options and Megan from PBOT. We started the innovation grants, not this current cycle, but the one before that. So the first awards were awarded in 2022 for the 2023-2024 federal fiscal years. That was our first cycle doing the innovation grants. And we started that through a process with the Safe Routes to School Advisory Committee of trying to have a equitable approach to programming where we have different tiers, and folks apply for the tier based on basically the level of programming that agency has met or has worked with. So beginners would start with a tier 1, and intermediate folks who have either already had a tier 1 or have been going for a while would be on the tier 2, and then tier 3 would be innovation grants. And so innovation grants are more for advanced programs who have had some ODOT funding in the past, and just want to expand their work, create more sustainable programming for what they've already have been working with. And oftentimes they want to kind of innovate, right? And come up with a new idea, something that they haven't tried before, and they'd like to implement it. And the goal of the innovation grants is not to just to be like let's try an experiment, one and done kind of thing. It's more of like an investment into long-term activities within the program. So folks, these are up to about $50,000 for a 2-year grant cycle. So it's not to fund a coordinator position. It's not obviously enough money for all of that, but it's enough to have a little seed money to get this type of innovation going, set the foundation so that this could help the program be sustainable and also be a sustainable piece to continue after the grant is over. So The idea behind this was to still have an opportunity for funding for advanced programs, but challenge them to do something new that helps their sustainability. So folks who scored the highest in this process were ones who were focused on marginalized groups who need a little more equitable access to walk and roll resources and activities, and also folks who had a pretty good vision of where their bike ped education was going, and ones that wanted to use this innovation in ways that was going to help their sustainability. So, so PBOT and Commute Options were selected for their projects were selected, and I'm really excited for them to share their work. I wish we could have done this a little bit shortly after the projects, but I think it might almost be better for it to be a little longer term, so that they have a chance to reflect over the work they did and how that can perhaps help them. Also, too, the goal of this was to create for the innovations to be replicable, so that any of the other coordinators or programs may be able to take what these groups have done and be able to replicate it in some sense in their own program. So they had deliverables that were met, that they had to create something like a document or something, a training manual, to one, help with their sustainability, but also two, be able to share with other folks. So if you see something in here that kind of ignites your enthusiasm to maybe try something similar, feel free to reach out so we can share those resources. And with that, I think Brian's going first, right?
Yep.
Okay. Take away, Brian.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Potwin, pronouns he, him. I'm with Commute Options. And I think, Nora, you run the slides. Fantastic. Next one for me. So if you don't know who we are, Commute Options is dedicated to innovative transportation options that connect people of all ages to the places they go. So employees to their workplaces, students to their schools, safe routes to school, and neighbors with their communities. We champion active transportation and infrastructure improvement, fostering partnerships like with all of you here today, and community on transportation options. And so our mission is to increase access to transportation options across Oregon. And that's exactly what this project was all about. So Heidi mentioned sustainability. And I think also, Heidi, you said we were an advanced program. I'll take that as a compliment. Oh, thumbs up. That was accurate. So, really thinking about how we can use, or how this project could be used to help advance other people, other communities in their Safe Routes program. Next slide. So our project, we called it Education in Action. And this is really focused around our walking school bus and bike train program that we had already rolling at Commute Options, and thinking about how we could move that forward and also get more resources and education to students and families. So as Heidi mentioned as well, this is something that we wanted to do so it was replicatable across the state and across programs. This manual is available on our website if you're interested. After listening to my wonderful pitch here today about what it is and how it can be used, you can go check it out and use it. We've got some good lessons learned with it as well. And we are excited because Ben Lapine School District was recently awarded a Safe Routes to School grant with ODOT TSO. And they are starting to take a look at this and see how they can use it within their programming that they're planning right now. So it's already getting some good use, which is fantastic. So a little bit more about it. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this, the Education in Action Manual of Resources, really a collection of all the education, action, and walking school bus materials we've executed over all the years we've been doing this work. So these materials that Safe Routes to School practitioners, community members, school staff, and caregivers have often requested from community options when launching their own programs. So we wanted to really collate everything together into one document that's user friendly for people to access the resources to start their own walking school bus program, but also not just getting students and families to and from school safely, but like I mentioned before, providing some education along the way too. And this looks very different from what you would think of traditionally as a bike or pedestrian safety education program in the schools during class time, because you're literally on the move with them, and there's a group just like this, and so it's not as structured as you might have inside of a classroom. So we wanted to reflect that in the actual process and what was happening on the ground. So within this, I wasn't that. Yep. Thank you, though. You were kind of reading me right. So as Heidi mentioned as well, this is a Tier 3 innovation grant that we're awarded. We wrapped up the process with this in September of 2024. We worked with schools across the Bend LaPine School District, collaborated with them, and also our practitioners here in the Central Oregon area. So moving forward, thank you, Nora. Within this, it's structured in a way so that any program can start from the ground up with this. So it's looking at all the basics of what you need to make it successful. So that means starting with the leaders, how to recruit leaders. What does that actually look like in your area? Are there stipends that can be used? Is it completely volunteer basis? Are there partnerships that can be worked with as far as working with kids clubs, potentially church groups, neighborhood associations? And so where are these leaders coming from? How do we not only do background checks and certify them to work with the schools, but how do we train them on the basics? So within this overall manual, it's broken down looking at first the leaders, so the leader packet, and then moving forward. Once we have, and there's tons of details, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but these are just the sections within the manual itself. And then once we've identified who the leaders are and the routes that which I'll talk about in a moment, we get out in the community and we start talking to the families and the students in that area and identify who are the highest potential to be participants, and then we bribe them with Pacific Pizza and Brew, it looks like, as well. This is our wonderful, not the brew part, strike that, just the pizza part. Sorry. And the pizza was not part of the contract. We bought it ourselves. Just to clarify that, Heidi. So having nights, going to neighborhoods, working with apartment complexes, being accessible to educate that this is an opportunity. This is something that they can do that's in their area, and is, it's not as easy as that sounds, but sometimes it is. You actually get out there and you talk to the families and say, hey, you've got this trail right next to your apartment complex, and we're going to start running this walking school bus. Here, let's get your student registered for it. So we go through a registration process to make sure that we have all the correct information that we need with the students as well, so we can move forward. Next slide, please. And then collaborating with the schools, really keeping track, of course, of who is doing it, how often are they doing it. This is one of our leaders that we were working with, and having a log sheet that's actually based at the school itself. And this really is a mechanism to not only get some good data, but also to keep track and gain some confidence with the schools. So there's a check-in process with the schools. So it's a little bit more formal in that capacity of We picked up 10 kids and we delivered 10 kids to the front door. Check. And really going back over it to make sure that we're covering all of our bases to have this be super legitimate and a very valid form of transportation. Next slide, please. So I mentioned routes. Routes are a big key portion of this as well. So something that we have done in our schools that we work with is actually create some safe suggested walking and rolling routes to and from school. We've worked with the school district, with our city as well, and we do walk audits to determine where these routes actually are. And we're pretty excited because, as I mentioned before, our school district just hired someone internally to work on safe routes to school, which is going to give us a lot more good data as far as where the students are accurately coming from. So that's super fantastic to be able to really hone in these routes. We're working with the city of Bend to refine these, and also a nice byproduct of this too within the walk audits is to share this information with the city planning and engineering departments to in order to create better infrastructure for these routes and change these routes as infrastructure changes as well. If lighting changes, if sidewalk infill happens, crossing guards, all of that good stuff, we adapt these and update these route maps. And so we also use these for our walking and rolling routes, and we follow them. So if you can kind of see on this slide, both of the origin points for this are at apartment complexes. And that wonderful picture of Whitney a couple of slides back is actually at an apartment complex talking to the students and families. So we try to collaborate and also make it, a reasonable distance as well. Probably most of you here are familiar with walking school buses and bike trains, but keeping that, within a reasonable distance so we can actually get to the school safely and on time. So each of these distances are less than a mile long. So once we have all these pieces in place, then we can move forward with starting the routes and getting kiddos out there. And next slide, please. Actually doing that education in action. So as I mentioned before, it's not as formal of curriculum as you might see within the actual in-classroom portion. What we like to think of it as is gamification of the actual education, because you're moving with groups and it's super informal. So here you have a scavenger hunts, thinking about what students actually need to be safe while walking and rolling to and from school. And next slide, please. Looking at infrastructure that they encounter along the way, what types of vehicles are out there, what type of infrastructure is out there, what is a crosswalk, how to use a crosswalk safely. That's something that we noticed that the students that weren't in our Safe Routes to School education program, they didn't have the knowledge to cross the street safely without an adult standing there holding their hand and telling them when to go, basically. So working with the students, and that's the most formal part of this education in action, is the crossing the street portion of it. And as I always like to say, youth and adults could learn from this as far as how to do the steps safely. So we use this opportunity because there's lots of crosswalks that we come across with all the routes that we've done, and how to interact with driveways as well and where to look. So this type of gamification allows us to do it in a format that efficiently moves the students and also teaches them information at the same time. Within this too, we have challenges that we run to motivate the students to keep coming back. So we do incentives and prizes with this. We keep track, like I said before, of who has come to the program specifically and try and get them to be reoccurring, which is it panned out really well with this. And we're, like I said, super excited that we can now use this manual and transfer this over to our school district here. So next slide for me, Nora. So education action was a powerful way to support students walking and rolling to and from school. It effectively infused safe routes, walking, rolling, biking education into daily walking groups and empowered many students to start walking to school independently. We've seen that as well, which has been great. Over time, the students, some of the ones that you see here have aged out. So of course, we're not working with them anymore. But we've been able to use these materials that are developed during this as an excellent resource for future walking and rolling routes. Ben Lapine, like I said, observed the value of this. And they're now working to create their own program, which was awarded Tier 1 education. And they've got an active transportation specialist who started up and is creating their own plan about how to move forward. And this is absolutely part of that program. So I wasn't really sure how much time I had here, so I kind of kept it brief. But like I said before, you can go to the next slide. This manual is up on our website. It's available to download, connect with us. This is my contact information. But if you really want to talk to our Safe Routes coordinator, which is Marka Tamura, she's available as well to answer questions about the manual itself and start integrating this into your programs. So thanks for having us on here today. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, and like I said earlier, if people have questions for Brian or about that program, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll collect questions for the end. We're going to move on next to Megan Russell.
Hello, thank you for having me. I can introduce myself. My name is Megan Russell. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator on the Safe Routes to School team at Portland Bureau of Transportation. So I work on our various curricula. We have pedestrian safety for elementary PE, bike safety for upper elementary and middle school PE, and then some classroom programs for middle school and high school. And I'm going to talk about the latter of those today, which is our Transportation Academy. And then I also reach out to teachers and school districts to basically recruit people to do our education programming. And then I go into schools and train the teachers so that they can lead it. And I'll share more details on that too. But our grant that we got in 2022 was to build out our Transportation Academy, which is our high school education programming. And we can go to the next slide here. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is, the format of how it works in schools, and broadening that to like place it in our context of youth education and engagement and what we're trying to achieve with the program. So background, before I was hired at PBOT, I was hired summer of 2022. In 2021 was the first year that we had the Transportation Academy program. So this is an in-classroom program building transportation skills for high schoolers. And the first year of it was at Alliance High School, which is an alternative school in Portland Public Schools. So that was with a small group of students, and the Safe Routes to School team learned a lot there, I think, about what needed to be in it and the best way to expand it into schools. In 2022, we got our ODOT Innovation Grant, and we reached out and partnered with the Elevate program in Parkrose High School. So Elevate is an organization that has programs in several schools. So all the ones in Parkrose High School, and then a couple in other East Portland and East County districts. And they work with primarily youth of color, and also some just like at-risk youth of other demographic backgrounds to build academic skills and make career connections so that they're setting up students for success after they graduate. And in that first year, we trained 4 teacher mentors at Parkrose High School, and they shared the program with their students. And then we gathered feedback from the teachers and students for revisions for the next phase of our Transportation Academy. And so our work through that grant helped set us up for the next step that we're on now, which is expanding it to some more schools. So Transportation Academy, the format of it is an interactive PowerPoint. So the idea is the content will be easily usable for teachers where this is not their primary subject. They're not used to teaching about transportation. There's speaker notes on every slide to help teachers be guided in what they're saying to the students, and also have prompts for interaction. So like turn and talk questions to share with their students. And there's things for students to do in all the modules so that it isn't just a lecture format. It's 5 class periods. Each one focuses on a specific area of transportation skills. So this is an example of content on one of the slides about bike safety. There's a bike and other wheels safety module, a pedestrian safety one, driver safety, and then transit skills. And then there's one module that sort of puts transportation in a larger scientific and social studies context. So talking about the impact of transportation modes on climate change, what needs to happen to mitigate that, ways that youth can be involved if they want, and also tying into transportation justice and equity, the holes in that in Portland and what needs to change there as well. So at Park Rose, I guess I already talked about this one a little, I jumped the gun on it, but part of what we were trying to achieve in our work there was making sure that the Transportation Academy is meeting the goals of giving students who are approaching adulthood the skills to get around safely and independently, to choose modes that like align with their values and their needs, and to know how to access the resources they need to use the modes. So there were activities for route planning using various modes. We showed them apps for biking and for transit, just to help students figure out a lot of options for like ways to get where they need to go that they might not have known about. Oh, I'm seeing questions on here. Oh, cool. I have a question slide at the end, so I will come back and talk about these because I want to make sure that we can have that conversation. So we use a train the trainer module. We're adopting that for all of our education K through 12. The reason for that is we serve 5 school districts, something like 116 schools, and I am the one education coordinator. So I obviously can't go in and teach at all of them. I do end up doing some like co-teaching and teaching support, but for us to have the capacity to reach as many students as we want to, we need the teachers leading it. The other advantage of that is that they know their students and they know their school and they know how things need to be presented to really serve their students, and they're going to do a better job teaching them than I will as an outsider coming in who doesn't know those kids. There's pros and cons to both, obviously, because when we're going into schools as subject matter experts, we have a lot more like depth of experience and expertise on the topic we're talking about than those teachers do. And on the other hand, they're the ones who know their kids. So the goal is to make this collaboration strike a balance where we're helping give them some of those skills and they're bringing their own like teaching knowledge and knowledge of their student population to the work. So we go in, we do a training for the teachers, we answer all their questions, we make sure that they feel prepared to teach, and then they share the material with the students, and sometimes we come in and support some of that. Oh, and these are the next 4 slides are ones that we used in a different presentation talking about Vision Zero, so we actually can skip ahead a little bit. And another one, and one more. There we go. So these are some of the tie-ins that we did with the Transportation Academy. The meat and potatoes of it is that interactive PowerPoint, the in-classroom instructional materials, but we also work with schools and teachers individually to do some add-ons that they and their students are interested in. So we've recruited guest speakers to come in and talk to students. Some of the ones we've had were folks from TriMet, folks from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability at the City of Portland, and also the PBOT director, Millicent Williams, have all come and spoken to students. It's about things like career opportunities and like tie-ins to other areas of interest that connect with transportation. We've gotten students out and on bikes. For 9th and 10th graders, we bring out some of our bike fleet that we use mostly with middle schools, and we take them on a community ride. So they're practicing bike skills that they've otherwise just talked about in the classroom. So it usually isn't like a full like bike education session, but we're taking kids who know how to ride out on a community ride, and sometimes doing like a little learn to ride on campus for kids who don't already know. And then upperclassmen, juniors and seniors get to have e-bike orientations if they're within like the bike town catchment area. And my colleague Guy, who is our youth engagement coordinator, sets that up, and he gets them memberships, teaches them how to use the bikes, and takes them on a ride. We've done walking field trips and transit field trips. And then last summer, through our Transportation Academy, we managed to connect with Lentz Youth Initiative and get a couple youth interns who were with us all summer, who made a very cool video about the safe system approach in Vision Zero and crash prevention and mitigation. That's been shared out a couple places, and some of you might have seen it, but I can share that with this group later because it's really neat. But the goal with the Transportation Academy is to have it not just be in classroom education, but connect it to other ways of engaging youth in transportation systems. Then we did student surveys after kids learned the Transportation Academy because we wanted to figure out how effective it was at the goals of promoting mode shift and promoting safety and helping students be familiar with resources available to them. So these are some examples of survey data, like ways that students self-reported that they were planning on getting around. And this we compared with data on how most students were traveling before the Transportation Academy, which unsurprisingly, it was like a majority of kids either driving or being driven, that we did have a lot of transit users as well, especially at Parkrose High School. And then we also wanted to hear about what was most engaging to students, because that tells us what things they're already thinking about that they want to know more about in transportation, like where they perceive those needs as being, because we don't want to have exclusively a top-down approach where we are making judgments about what the youth need to know. So we can be data informed about the safety and resource needs of our populations, while at the same time, like asking them directly, what are they interested in? What might the adults in their life not know that the kids need to know? So this was some of our data on that. And then we had a couple questions that got at safety skills. So again, this is an imperfect predictor of what they'll actually do. It's self-reports, but it's a picture of like what they're thinking about after having the content in class. Yeah. What questions do people have for me? I can start with stuff that I see in this in the chat. Place on the PBOT website where we can access the slides. Yes. I can get that link right after this and drop it in the chat, but it is on our education page. And they're getting revamped this summer because we did a big feedback process this year as well. And there's a lot of revisions that are about to happen. So I can share the updated one with the group after that happens, but I'll share the current one today too.
And Megan, if it's okay with you, I'm happy to share those out, or pass Indigo will do the follow-up from this webinar, so I can have her include them in an email.
Great.
Yeah, let's open it up to the group. I have a few questions in mind, but I'll open it up to the group first and just see if anyone has questions, either for Megan or Brian about their programs, or for Heidi about the innovation grant process, what the funds can be used for, the upcoming grant cycle, anything like that. Yeah, Sean, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, thank you all for the presentations. That was awesome. Megan, do you have access to a TriMet bus bike rack that you practice with?
No.
Okay.
That sounds cool though.
I'm trying to figure out a way to get one to Tigard, and I'm having a hard time locating one. I think the Street Trust has one. It's like a mobile one that is not attached to a bus. Okay, thanks.
Sean, doesn't the Community Cycling Center have one too?
They might. I know the PSU Bike Hub has one downtown.
Okay.
I think it's permanently mounted to a wall with a picture of a bus on the wall, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I'll check. Maybe they do have one at CCC.
And Becky asked if our Train the Trainer is in person or virtual. We do it in person. We've been going out to schools and meeting with the teachers. That's been feasible so far because we are not in a large number of high schools. We've had content in 5 high schools so far. Thanks, Janice.
Oh yeah, thank you, Janice. I was wondering, I guess this is more of a question for Brian. I think Megan kind of spoke to this, just about the innovation aspect of these projects. So Megan mentioned that this Transportation Academy was building off of a 2021 pilot, and so the grant helped to expand it into more schools. I was curious, Brian, if you could speak to the innovation part of the developing this manual and what was already happening around walking school buses before, how this grant helped kind of expand or propel or just move things in a new direction.
Great question. So what was happening before is we were doing walking school buses and bike trains, but it was literally just getting students to and from school safely and consistently. And within that part of our programming, we noticed an opportunity to do a little bit more than that. And so what this project was about was compiling all of the resources we have and adapting them specifically to this new format. So that was the innovative part, is getting outside of how we operate in a more, what I would deem as a more traditional sense of what I mentioned before, which is that in-classroom piece, and trying to move it outside of the classroom in a more of a quick format that the students could learn as they were moving, and as I spoke about as well, in more of a gamification way that kept their interests and also kept them safe too.
Got it. So it sounds like just like an expansion of what's available for people that are leading walking school buses. And it sounds like also, were you able to use the funding for stipends for the leaders?
We did not do stipends
Okay.
for this project. That was a previous version of the program. For this version, it was volunteer based.
Got it. Okay.
I have a question for Brian. I don't know if you even know this, because I know your staff was working on this program more intimately, but do you know if there was more like participation consistently from students, maybe because of the activities that they were doing to and from school? Just curious, like their level of interest in maybe making the walk a little more exciting.
That's also a great question. So I think, Heidi, it was really a combination of not only the education activities, but also the challenges that we tacked onto it too, to bring that consistency within the attendance that was happening. And once we were able to form the groups, and the groups started to kind of take a life of their own, as far as all the students knowing each other and creating that to and from school friendship, if you will. So just creating that culture around it. So I would definitely say it was a motivating factor, but it wasn't the only piece that piqued the interest of the students.
Cool.
And I do, since you mentioned, I do want to give a shout out. Whitney Bennett is not on the call, but she was the primary person who put all of the energy and love into this, and I would be remiss without mentioning that.
Other questions from the group? I see Miranda put something in the chat. For anyone that has used stipends, curious on how to do that easily. Do I need to check in that they're doing anything, or is it the honor system? So Miranda, it does really depend on where the funding for the stipends is coming from, and if there's any stipulations or requirements. Anyone in the group have experience with I know Metro got a grant to provide stipends to walking school bus leaders. I don't think anyone from Metro is here, but anyone else in the group have experience with stipends for volunteers, whether it's school district or state funding?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit.
Yep.
We didn't do specifically stipends. The liability piece within all of that was a big concern for the school district and also for ourselves. So we actually hired leaders, and they became employees of our organization. And that way we could cover them with our insurance. And that gave a lot more confidence to the school district to become a part of this program too. So we definitely looked into the stipend piece. but it got really tricky, and we decided that the part-time employment was the better way for us to go. We had a little flexibility with that, so I'm not sure if that's the best fit for all entities and organizations, but it worked for us.
Thanks, Brian. That's a great example of kind of thinking outside of the box for how to compensate within the structures that exist.
I have a question for Megan.
Yeah.
Any like lessons learned of like things that you wish you guys would have thought of ahead of time, or thought through a little better, or just anything to kind of help people kind of think about how to set this up and coordinate it?
That's a great question. I think that throughout, I think it's not so much an oversight as just like a takeaway that we learned that often one of the most challenging things is coordinating with and reaching teachers, because they have a lot of things going on that are more central to them than this. This is like an add-on that is not the first thing that they think about when they're at work. So like email responsiveness was a challenge a lot of the time. And sometimes to reach a teacher, we had to just like show up in their classroom. So planning for that and like learning what the most effective systems are for contact with teachers, I think is something that's really useful. A lot of our other learnings and takeaways were like the feedback that we deliberately sought out, and the stuff that we heard back from students. We had not on this grant, but on the one following it that built off of it, our work at McDaniel High School, we worked with a group of students who were individuals who were already thinking a lot about transportation. They were in the bike club at the school. So they were like, you should have an activity where you walk the students through this app and use it together as a group, and or look at like this YouTube creator who has all these videos demonstrating this concept you talk about. So I think it really brought home to me how much youth can be a resource for us, and not just vice versa, that they might know some things that we're not already plugged into that will be really useful additions. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Also too, just to tack onto that, was there any like, as coordinators are starting to work more with older students, particularly going into high school, was there any kind of like cool moments where you're like, wow, maybe some of these students might take off with some of this work or be really good at doing this type of work? Was there any stories of inspiration for students?
Yeah, I think so. In Park Rose in the Elevate classroom, so on this grant, when we had Director Williams come in and do, she participated in a Place It workshop that we did. So that was when students were using like found objects that we provided to design like ideal neighborhoods and streets and intersections, and like what would their like dream transportation world look like, but also asked Director Williams a lot of questions that were very thoughtful and insightful, and that pointed to interest in like city planning and asking about why things are the way they are, and like why do we use this standard and not this other one. That just like showed a lot of investment from the students, that I think adults are often surprised by in broader systems than just like what they're encountering every day. They like want to know about how their city works and want to be both informing that with their own experience and like learning about the ways that decisions are made.
Cool.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And also,
sorry, I'm just noticing Janice's message. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. And if anyone else has questions, please just put your hand up or unmute or go in the chat. But this is mostly a question for Heidi. Wondering if you could speak to like the like the innovation grants are tier 3. So can you speak to kind of the progression between them and whether do people need to go through tier 1 and 2 in order to be eligible for tier 3? And then kind of side question to that is like, what tips or advice do you have for communities that are thinking about applying in the next round?
Yeah, applying for the innovation or just in general?
Innovation. Yeah,
Okay.
and who's eligible? Like, do you have to go through
Yeah.
tier 1, tier 2?
Yeah. No, you don't have to go through tier 1, tier 2. It's, it's not required. However, you're like applying for both at the same time, like at tier 1 and 3 probably wouldn't work because we need you to be a little bit more further along and sustainable and have a bigger vision. And we likely probably wouldn't fund people for 2 different grants simultaneously, like a 2 and 3. But no, you don't have to. Most are or have been funded through tier 1 and tier 2, or even before we started doing the tiers. So right now, if you've been funded, so currently, if you've been funded twice within the last 3 funding cycles, you're only eligible for a tier 3. That's the way it was kind of determined through a process of just conversations with the advisory committee and just thinking about how many communities there are that haven't been funded before, and kind of trying to push communities to, challenge them to find other sources of funding and let other folks be eligible to apply as well. So it's kind of a tough balance of like, we don't have enough funds to go around to everybody. So how do we, the idea behind the tiers was tier 1 was supposed to kind of be the extra support to put, so you get the education grant plus some consultant work to kind of help you get started. And then tier 2 is just the education grant. And so the idea was that by the time you're done with tier 2, you could potentially be ready for tier 3. This is only our 2nd cycle doing it, so not sure if this is working, but we can work with the advisory committee in kind of evaluating these as they go along. And we are just about to start working with the advisory committee on this next cycle. So I'm actually not sure what tier 3 will look like. It could be a change up. May not be necessarily innovation grants particular. It might be another type of grants. So more to come on that, I think, as we start to work with the advisory committee on what the next cycle will look like. But advice for innovation grants is basically, just know that this is not obviously a big chunk of funds. So it needs to be something that is manageable, something that's kind of a bite-sized project that you're going to be able to sustain after the grant is over, and be thinking about how this project can help the bigger picture of our program. So really be thinking about your long-term plans of like what you would like to see and how that project can help you get there. Did I answer?
Yeah, totally.
What you're asking? Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
You hit all of it in a multi-layered question, so thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from the group? I think we have time for a couple more. I can ask one more question to Megan and Brian. Just curious in terms of like how you use the $50,000 over the 2 years, and like obviously you don't need to get into like the super specifics, but how how much of that funding went toward like staff time versus materials versus, sounds like there weren't stipends involved, but yeah, what was kind of just generally like the breakdown of how those funds got used?
For us, for this grant, it was mostly staff time because this was one that didn't have a lot of physical materials involved.
I'd echo that.
Any final question from the group here?
Thank you for coming, Brian and Megan. We appreciate this. I think having you guys present this hopefully will inspire others to kind of think about different ways to approach some of this, especially thinking about how we work with youth and students going into high school, because this brings us into our next webinar coming up in June with the high school task force. So
yeah, thanks so much, Megan and Brian, for being a part of this conversation today. It was inspiring to hear about those two examples, and especially like far in advance of the next grant cycle, so people can start getting some ideas brewing. I'll just talk through a couple of final announcements from the statewide program to wrap up, and we'll send out the links to all of these things over email. Indigo is going to send that out tomorrow. So we have a lot of folks on this call are signed up but next Tuesday we have a de-escalation training happening virtually from 10 to 1. There is a sign up through Eventbrite, and then you'll get a Zoom link. So this will cover all kinds of communication and conflict resolution techniques. And then for June, we have a webinar that is focused on some of our work with high schoolers. We've been piloting a high school task force over the past 4 months. And so they've been working on projects in their communities, and we're going to have probably not all of them, but a couple of representatives from the task force come and share about their projects and be available for answering questions and chatting. So that's going to be a pretty special opportunity to hear from them. And then we have a high school video contest running through the end of the month, and this is focused on things that are unique about students' routes to school. So encouraging students to film a max 60-second video of some unique features of their route. And yeah, we have a flyer with all the information about how that gets submitted. So if you work with high schools, you have connections with high schools, if you could share the information about the contest, that would be super helpful. And then lastly, yeah, many of you attended the annual meeting a few weeks ago. It was really fun, and just, yeah, really appreciate everyone's enthusiasm and participation on that day. We do have a survey that we'll send out one more time just for feedback. We're always looking for suggestions of what to adjust in the future. We definitely made a few changes to this year's annual meeting based on last year's feedback. So please take a moment to fill it out. We do take your feedback seriously. And yeah, of course, we'll have lots more coming up this summer, a quarterly meeting in July. So we'll send more information about that in the next month. And yeah, thanks so much for being here. Feel free to reach out if any questions from these presentations come up for you over the next few days. And Indigo will send a follow-up email tomorrow. And in response to Megan Moser's question, the training will not be recorded because these equity trainings have sometimes vulnerable conversations and participation. We don't record them.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye.